My husband shattered my dinner plate in front of his entire family. The room froze, except for the laughter. His mother giggled behind her wine glass. His sister whispered something cruel I couldn't hear. I smiled, not because it didn't hurt, but because I knew they'd just handed me everything I needed. That plate wasn't just porcelain. It was the last piece of the version of me they thought they could destroy. Let them laugh. I already knew how this story ended, and they wouldn't like the role they were about to play. The dining room shimmered beneath the weight of a $100 bottle of wine and her handmade centerpieces. White roses arranged with surgical precision, each napkin folded into a swan. Emily stood behind the kitchen island, apron barely creased, lips tinted the soft coral Michael once said made her look presentable enough. The lasagna was hot, the timing perfect. She'd choreographed every moment like a stage play. Michael's family arrived with the predictable air of mild indifference. His sister Vanessa commented on the driveway being too narrow. His mother, June, wrinkled her nose at the scent of roasted garlic, then recovered with a tight smile. Emily poured drinks, offered seconds, refilled glasses, complimented dresses. Every detail, every gesture was flawless. And for a moment she felt it, that fleeting, precarious pride. The illusion that maybe, just maybe, she'd cracked something. Maybe this was the night they'd finally see her, not just as Michael's wife, but as a woman of worth. June raised her glass. To women who hold families together, she said, smiling at Emily with the kind of approval that bites, quietly, graciously, without asking for anything in return. Everyone clinked glasses. Emily's smile didn't falter, but she felt her fingers tighten around the stem of her own. Michael hadn't said a word since they sat. He'd taken 2 bites, scrolled through his phone once, and occasionally glanced at her like she was a noise he hadn't decided was annoying yet. She rose to clear his plate, the gesture automatic after years of conditioning. As she reached across the table to take it, Michael lifted it, and with a single sudden jerk, smashed it against the edge of the table. The sound split the room like a gunshot. Pasta flew. Sauce splattered across her cream-colored dress, dripping onto the floor. Her hands froze mid-air. No one moved. Then Vanessa laughed. A short, choked giggle. June followed, covering her mouth like she'd just witnessed a harmless prank. "I guess someone didn't like dinner," Michael said, not even looking at her. His tone was flat, almost bored. Emily stood there, porcelain shards around her feet, tomato sauce slowly bleeding into the silk fabric near her knees. Her heart didn't race. Her hands didn't shake. Her breath remained calm. She smiled. It wasn't wide. It wasn't fake. It was a barely there curve that hovered between composure and something far colder. "I'll get the broom," she said softly. No one offered to help. Later, when the guests had gone and Michael had disappeared into his office without a word, Emily knelt on the floor with a dustpan and a rag. Her dress was ruined. Her knees ached. Her knuckles were raw from scrubbing dried sauce. But she moved slowly, deliberately, as if cleansing not just the tiles, but her entire reality. At the sink, she washed the rest of the dishes alone. The clatter of ceramic was rhythmic, almost meditative. Each plate a reminder, each rinse a memory. Vanessa telling her last Christmas, "We never thought you'd last this long." June explaining over brunch how women like Emily should be grateful just to be married into legacy. Michael asking her not to speak when his colleagues visited because her voice made her sound too emotional. She stood in front of the dishwasher, hands pruned and wet, staring at her own reflection in the black screen of the microwave. It was like looking at a version of herself from a parallel life, one who hadn't flinched at shattered porcelain, one who'd smiled in the face of humiliation, one who was done. At 1:47 a.m., Emily opened her laptop. She hadn't planned it. The idea didn't arrive with fanfare. It just appeared. A name, a sentence. ExitElegance.com. She bought the domain in under 4 minutes. No hesitations, no second thoughts. She didn't know what it would become. A blog, a business, a manifesto. All she knew was that it would belong to her. And for the first time in years, that was enough. The morning after the dinner incident, Emily brewed Michael's coffee just the way he liked it, black, scalding, bitter. She placed it beside his folded newspaper without a word. When he looked up, she smiled like nothing had changed, like her soul hadn't cracked somewhere between the laughter and the ceramic. For a week, she played the role. She made the bed, cooked his meals, nodded at his passive-aggressive remarks. She hosted brunch for June 2 days later, slicing fruit while her mother-in-law droned on about real estate taxes. She complimented Vanessa's manicure, laughed at the appropriate moments, even brought wine to a family friend's anniversary party. But it wasn't life. It was a wake. Every act of wifeliness felt like a eulogy. She was attending the funeral of the version of her that had once believed this house was a home, that this man was a partner. Each day she wore a different mask, and each night she peeled it off, slowly, deliberately. At midnight, when the house went still, she turned on her laptop. 2 years ago, Michael had dismissed her idea to invest in a small fintech startup. She'd done it anyway, through a friend's name, using a separate account. That friend had just texted, offering to buy her out with interest. Emily sold her share for a quiet $18,400. She didn't tell a soul. The next day, she found a local law firm specializing in marital asset protection and high net worth divorces. She submitted an inquiry through their website using an alias, a burner email, a prepaid phone number. She ticked exploring options, then closed the tab. She wasn't leaving, not yet. She was erasing. That same night, she enrolled in a JavaScript course, 6 hours per week, self-paced, taught by a woman who'd coded her way out of debt and into a yacht. Emily sat cross-legged on the bed, Michael snoring beside her, as lines of code filled her screen. Variables, loops, logic gates. It all felt cleaner than people, more reliable. On Thursday, she posted in a private Slack group she'd joined months ago, but never participated in. It was called Underwire, and filled with women building tools no one took seriously until someone tried to steal them. She introduced herself simply as Elle. Ella's first project was a lightweight plugin for small business accounting, something to automate tax category tagging. Within a week, 2 strangers had Venmo'd her $25 each, then 5, then 15. On Friday night, someone bought a 3-user license for $399. She stared at the confirmation email like it was a flare shot into the sky. By Sunday, she'd made her first $5,000, legally, anonymously, independently. Emily created a savings account in Switzerland, routed through a digital bank built for international entrepreneurs. She uploaded her paperwork under her LLC's name. LLC. L Code Studio, registered in Delaware, office address, a co-working space she'd never enter. Everything she'd been told not to touch, finance, tech, autonomy, was now hers, quiet, hidden, untouchable. On Monday afternoon, she returned from Whole Foods with fresh basil and a white porcelain plate. Not just any plate, the plate. Same pattern, same weight, same perfect vulnerable fragility. She set it on her desk, still wrapped in tissue paper. Then she opened a notepad and wrote just one line. "This is the last time I ever let myself be broken." She tucked it beneath the plate, placed them both inside a drawer she now considered sacred. When Michael came home, she kissed him on the cheek. She asked about his day. She laughed at his mild joke about her lasagna being less offensive this time. But that night, while he showered, she watched the money land in her offshore account. She dragged and dropped code into a new build for her plugin. She updated her burner calendar with a virtual meeting to discuss expansion. And then, for no reason she could fully explain, she stood in the hallway and whispered to herself, "I don't need to leave to win. I just need to stop needing to stay." Emily stood in front of the mirror, a pair of gold scissors in one hand, her own hair tangled in the other. The morning sun filtered through the bathroom blinds, casting lines across her reflection like prison bars. She didn't flinch as she snipped, Strand after strand fell into the sink until the long waves Michael once called the only soft thing about you were gone. She'd chosen a sharp bob, polished, corporate, unapologetic. At the salon, she added subtle highlights, swapped the coral lipstick for oxblood, traded pastels for monochrome, shift dresses for tailored trousers. Gone was the lavender perfume she used because June once said it made her seem approachable. In its place, black pepper and rosewood, dark, expensive, unmistakable. When Emily walked downstairs that evening, Michael blinked. "You look sharp," he said, unsure whether it was compliment or criticism. "Thank you," she answered before he could decide. Over the next 2 weeks, she changed everything except the things he thought he'd won. She still made his coffee, still smiled at family dinners, still played her part. He didn't notice that she never actually answered his questions anymore, that her laugh had shifted, lower and more deliberate, that her silence wasn't passive but poised. Michael mistook her transformation as submission, and that made him comfortable, which made him careless. Vanessa texted her for fashion advice. June complimented her posture. Even Michael bragged once at dinner, "She's finally found herself." They mistook evolution for obedience. They saw the shine and called it polish, not armor. So when Emily suggested a weekend getaway to reconnect, no one suspected a thing. She booked a coastal resort with cliffside villas and no nearby cell towers. She picked one with vintage charm, no smart home systems, no security surveillance. Instead, she brought her own. Tiny cameras, smaller than a fingernail, embedded in a decorative brooch, in the corner of her makeup bag, and behind the faux flower in the centerpiece of the dining table. The first night went smoothly. Michael toasted to renewed beginnings. June praised the oysters. Emily laughed and played hostess, even let Vanessa borrow her silk robe. But it was the second night that cracked everything open. They'd just finished dessert, the fire pit glowing in the courtyard. The wine had dulled edges. Emily stood, glass in hand, and mentioned a name no one expected. "Did you ever visit Kelsey and her son?" she asked Michael, her tone casual. The room shifted, chairs stilled, even the ocean seemed to pause. "Kelsey who?" June asked. Michael stared at Emily, jaw tight. "Enough." Emily blinked innocently. "Oh, sorry, I thought it was okay to talk about, since he's your son." June's wineglass slipped from her fingers and shattered. Vanessa gasped. Michael stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. His voice cracked, not from volume but from the strain of sudden exposure. "You don't know what you're talking about." Emily didn't move. "DNA test says otherwise." June clutched her chest. "Michael, is that true?" Michael turned to Emily with eyes full of rage, and then he slapped her. It wasn't hard, it wasn't even loud, but it was deliberate. And every lens caught it. No one noticed the tiny light blinking behind the floral centerpiece, or the brooch on the mantel now slightly askew. Emily's head snapped to the side. She turned back slowly, her lip bleeding. Her eyes were glassy, but not with tears. "I spent years being invisible in this family," she said calmly. "Tonight you made me unforgettable." Michael's hands shook. "You planned this?" Emily tilted her head. "Of course." She stood, walked to her room, and didn't slam the door. She didn't need to. Later that night, while everyone slept, or pretended to, Emily sat on the bathroom floor with her laptop. She uploaded the footage to a secure cloud drive, encrypted, mirrored to a USB key, and backed up in a hidden partition she'd created 2 weeks ago. Then she sent a copy to herself, one to her lawyer, and one to a burner account labeled "just in case." In the morning, she wore white. The slap was never mentioned. June acted like she'd dreamt it. Vanessa couldn't meet her eyes. Michael was silent, hollowed out by panic. As they packed the car to leave, he tried to pull her aside. "Emily," he whispered, "you don't understand what this could do." She looked at him, as if weighing whether he still existed. "I used to be your wife," she said softly. "Now I'm the lesson you'll never outlive." She closed the door and left him standing in the gravel driveway. The envelope arrived on a Monday, delivered by courier, signature required. Michael didn't recognize the law firm on the return address, Wellington and Bray, a boutique firm specializing in high-asset negotiations. He sliced it open with the same steak knife he used to intimidate waiters and unfolded the first page, Petition for Dissolution of Marriage. Below it, a clause, Equitable Division of Marital Property, 50-50 proposed. Then, stapled to the back, a still frame. Emily's face, frozen in profile, blood at the corner of her lip. Behind her, a blurred figure with his hand raised mid-motion. He dropped the papers. 2 hours later, he called the firm. No answer, just a polite voice recording and an email contact. When he finally sent an inquiry, the reply came from a generic account signed Associate Counsel, W&B. He couldn't find a photo of their office, couldn't find a LinkedIn for any of the names on the documents. That's because it didn't exist, not really. The firm was registered legally in Wyoming, its physical mailing address leased for $40 a month. The LLC behind it, owned by another LLC. That LLC? Controlled by L Code Studio. Emily had built her legal defense like a shell game, one layer of misdirection after another. By the time Michael traced anything back, the email trail was buried under encryption and proxies. By Wednesday, the footage had reached a journalist. Anonymous tip. No context, just the video. It hit social media like a dropped match in dry grass. A respected family man, a quiet wife, a violent slap caught on hidden camera. Within 48 hours, Michael was trending for all the wrong reasons. Emily didn't say a word. She didn't go on camera, didn't release a statement. She didn't have to. Her silence became its own kind of truth. Behind the scenes, she pushed the next domino. She sent her lawyer, herself, a secondary packet, screenshots, receipts, account statements, a trail that led to a private account Michael used for unreported income, shell transactions, and personal indulgences hidden from taxes, and his wife. The same account he'd used to wire money to Kelsey, the same one he told Emily didn't exist. Her legal team requested an audit, discreetly, but audits, like fires, tend to spread. By Friday, Michael's office had launched an internal review. Clients began pulling out. His name was whispered in every finance circle, followed by phrases like fraud and compliance risk. And still, Emily said nothing. She let it unfold like clockwork, each tick precise, each talk irreversible. Michael's phone rang constantly. Journalists, lawyers, family. Vanessa texted him a string of expletives. June stopped answering his calls. They reached out to Emily, of course. Messages filled her inbox. Pleas for mediation, statements of regret, attempts at settlement. She responded to none. Until June sent a final email, subject line, "Please," from a mother. Emily replied with a single photo, the broken plate, carefully framed on a velvet cloth. Below it, a caption, "Justice cold." The negotiations ended quickly after that. Emily's terms were clear. $3 million in compensation, 1 commercial property, and full rights to all shared investments. No appeals, no interviews, no contact. Michael signed. It took less than 5 months for his empire to fracture. He stepped down from his firm. His public image withered. Sponsors withdrew. Business partners vanished. His name became synonymous with downfall. Emily never appeared on camera. She let the myth build itself. Instead, she hosted a small dinner. 8 women. Some she knew, some she didn't. All had left men who'd use silence as a weapon, power as a leash. They sat around a long table, clinking glasses. The menu? Lasagna. A joke only she understood. Near the end of the night, one woman asked her what finally made her leave. Emily swirled her wine. "I didn't leave," she said. "I removed them from my story." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't name names. But every woman at that table understood exactly what she meant. The penthouse was immaculate. Every piece of furniture hand-picked, every corner curated. Concrete and glass, silver and white, modernity at its most refined. The view stretched endlessly across the skyline, the city blinking beneath like a grid of obedience. Emily stood barefoot on the marble floor, coffee cooling in her hand. There were no voices, no footsteps, no witnesses, just silence. And silence, she'd come to learn, had an aftertaste. She'd won. On paper, she had everything. Her own firm, a network of investors who revered her. The L brand was expanding into new tools, new platforms. Articles called her the woman who coded her way out of hell. Her name appeared on panels, in columns, in closed-door conversations. But the more she appeared, the more invisible she felt. She hadn't spoken to anyone off script in weeks. At night, she sat on the edge of her bed scrolling through messages she never answered. Invitations, flattery, requests for partnerships. Even a dinner proposal from a best-selling author who'd written a chapter about her. And yet, she couldn't stop asking herself, were they admiring her or trying to own her? She began to doubt her own team. Sophia, the operations lead, had once been warm, almost sisterly. Lately, her words felt calculated. Even the small things, how she paused before speaking, how she smiled, felt rehearsed. Emily caught herself reviewing security logs, checking who logged into which folder, what time files were accessed. She changed her passwords every 48 hours, monitored bank accounts daily, canceled 3 meetings just because a tone in an email seemed off. Control had made her powerful, but now it was devouring her. One night, unable to sleep, she opened the storage locker in her closet. Inside was a single hard drive, one of the original backups. She plugged it into her old laptop, the one Michael once said looked too cheap for a woman married into legacy. On it were archived videos, notes, recordings of the early days, of her voice, her fear, her plotting. She clicked on a folder labeled July 6th, the dinner, the laughter, the moment the plate shattered. She watched herself frozen in the footage, sauce on her dress, face still and unreadable. She watched as her mouth curved into a smile, controlled and terrifying. But what struck her wasn't the moment. It was her eyes. She didn't recognize them. That night, she walked through every room in the apartment, flicking on lights, checking corners. She looked into the lens of the security camera in her hallway and saw herself reflected back. A woman composed entirely of shadows. The next day, she gave a keynote speech at a global Women in Tech summit. Hundreds of faces watched her from the audience, cameras blinking, fingers live tweeting. She stood on stage in black, her voice smooth, her message polished. But as her slides clicked by, she saw her own face projected behind her, 10 feet tall, bright, sharp, and for the first time, it unnerved her. She looked like a ghost playing a woman. After the talk, people lined up to speak to her, shake her hand, capture selfies. Near the end of the line stood a girl, barely 20, nervous, wearing a blazer 2 sizes too big. When it was her turn, she didn't ask for a photo. Instead, she said, "You saved me. I read your story every day. You reminded me I'm not invisible." Emily felt something crack inside, not a violent shatter, just a soft, quiet fracture. The girl didn't see it, but the tremor reached her hands. Emily pulled her close, hugged her tightly, and cried, for the first time in years, not from rage, not from revenge, from remembrance. That night, she deleted every post on her professional accounts, erased her digital trail, sent her team a message: Elle is going dark, permanently. No press release, no farewell, just absence. She packed 2 suitcases, closed her laptop, tucked the broken plate, now glued back together, into a canvas bag. Then she left. No one saw where she went, and she liked it that way. The village was so small it didn't have a traffic light, just winding cobblestone streets, sun-faded shutters, and laundry lines that danced in the wind like old stories. Emily arrived without fanfare. No luggage tags, no credit cards linked to old names. Just 2 bags, a handwritten letter of recommendation, and a new name, Elise. She rented a modest stone house at the edge of town, olive trees to the left, a church bell to the right. The landlady, Signora Bellini, asked no questions. Elise was polite, soft-spoken, always paid in cash. In time, the villagers stopped asking where she was from. She belonged by how she listened. She began teaching math at the small primary school, volunteering 3 afternoons a week. Her Italian was clumsy at first, but numbers had their own language. The children adored her. One boy brought her wildflowers every Thursday. Another started solving fractions just to see her eyes light up. When she learned that the school had no computers, she started a quiet fundraiser. She contacted old acquaintances anonymously, used her remaining influence discreetly, funneled resources through untraceable paths. Within months, a computer lab was installed, 10 brand new machines, a printer, high-speed internet. The principal wept when it was unveiled. Elise told no one she'd once built software used by Fortune 500 companies, or that her story had made headlines worldwide. She didn't even keep a copy of the articles. That life was a skin she'd shed, a past she respected but no longer wore. Her days followed a rhythm she'd never known before. Wake with the birds, drink espresso on the porch, walk to school, eat fresh figs, watch sunsets that seemed to burn slower here, like they had nowhere else to be. Then, one afternoon, she found the plate. It had been at the bottom of her suitcase all along, wrapped in a scarf. The very same plate, cracked, glued, scarred. She'd carried it across countries through victories and losses, as if it were a part of her body. And now, as she sat on the kitchen floor of her stone house, holding it under the golden light, she finally knew what to do. She stood up, took the plate outside. There was no audience, no camera, no symbolism to perform. She lifted it gently and smashed it against the stone wall. This time, the sound didn't split her open. It freed her. Word traveled online like wind through tall grass. A site appeared overnight. No one claimed to run it. A collage of photos, quotes, theories. The Plate Lady, it was called, a digital shrine to an unnamed woman who once dismantled an empire with elegance and silence. Contributors speculated her identity. None of them got it right. The real woman was busy writing. The book began as fragments, notes scribbled on napkins, journal entries left unfinished. Over time, they found form, then shape, then spine. She titled it Quiet Revenge. She published it under a pseudonym. It sold modestly at first, until someone found a paragraph and posted it online. It exploded. The reviews called it haunting, instructive, revolutionary. Readers quoted lines like scripture. Book clubs debated its final chapter. Survivors emailed her in tears. Abusers cursed it in silence. It climbed bestseller lists, quietly, steadily, just like she had. The final sentence became its own phenomenon. Not all broken things need to be fixed. Some must stay broken to remind. Years later, Elise returned to the U.S. for a conference, not to speak, just to listen. She walked past buildings that once bore her old name, past bookstores with her anonymous book in the front window. No one recognized her. She rented a car and drove past the house where it all began. It looked smaller than she remembered. The driveway had been repaved. The shutters were a different color. A woman in yoga pants was watering potted plants. A child's bike lay on the grass. She didn't stop, just slowed, looked, and smiled. Then she kept driving and disappeared once more.